Hello and welcome. I'm Ellie Richardson and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some breaking news of this hour. The Justice Department has unredacted names like billionaire Les Wexner, assistant Leslie Groff and modelling agent Jean-Luc Brunel as Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirators in 2019 FBI agreements. President Trump has vowed to halt the opening of the Geordie Howe International Bridge connecting Detroit and Windsor unless Canada shares ownership and compensates the US for perceived trade imbalances. The White House has updated its fact sheet on the historic US-India trade deal, removing mentions of tariff reductions on certain pulses and softening language on India's purchase commitments. The Chinese yuan has surged to its strongest level against the US dollar since May 2023, trading around 6.91 offshore, driven by a firm central bank fixing and reports of Beijing urging banks to curb US Treasury holdings. A mass shooting in Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia, leaves 10 people dead, including the suspect, with over 25 injured in attacks at a high school and a nearby home. Police found 6 victims inside Tumbler Ridge Secondary School. President Donald Trump escalates tensions with Iran, threatening aggressive actions if Tehran doesn't meet US demands on nuclear and missile issues. In a recent interview, Trump stated that without a deal, the US would have to do something very tough amid ongoing talks mediated by Oman. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky intends to reveal plans for presidential elections and a peace deal referendum on February the 24th, marking the 4th anniversary of Russia's invasion. Indonesia readies up to 8,000 troops for Board of Peace efforts in Gaza. The troops will form part of the International List Stabilization Force under US President Donald Trump's Board of Peace. We start with some breaking news for this hour. NATO has launched Arctic Sentry, a multi-domain activity designed to bolster the alliance's presence and defence posture in the Arctic and high north. This strategic move follows growing concerns over Russia's military activities and China's increasing interest in the region. NATO has emphasised that the initiative will ensure the Arctic remains secure. The initiative is expected to guide and support allied nations' operations, including Denmark's Arctic endurance exercise in Greenland. The collaboration was discussed and agreed upon by US President Donald Trump and Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte during the recent Davos meeting. We are now being joined by Alison Mutler, who's a former AP Bureau Chief, who's joining us from Bucharest. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World.
Hi, Alex.
Why has NATO launched the Arctic Sentry mission now? And what strategic threats in the Arctic is the alliance responding to what's happening right now?
Well, I think we know at the beginning of the year, Donald Trump, the American president, said that the US simply had to acquire Greenland, and that set off all kinds of signals and tensions with Europe, because Greenland is basically part of Denmark. It has some autonomy, but it's basically part of Denmark. So, you know, that would have been one NATO ally attacking another if he were simply to acquire it. At one point, there was even talk of military force. So there have been a flurry of diplomatic discussions. Europe has made its position clear that this is part of Danish territory, and the US simply can't just have it. But as you said, at Davos, Donald Trump talked to NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, and they're known to have a good relationship. And they obviously worked out some compromise deal in the sense that Donald Trump would no longer simply acquire Greenland, but that NATO would prioritize security in the not just Greenland, but also what they call the High North, meaning Iceland and Norway, basically areas within the Arctic. And the reason for this is because Russia is showing interest. As you said just earlier, China is showing interest. And the world is changing. There is climate change, there are precious resources in Greenland particularly, and new maritime routes. And so NATO needs, or it feels it needs to act swiftly and decisively so that other, hostile powers or rivals, big powers such as China and Russia, do not get there first and do not create problems. They want to secure their own position. They want to secure it because it's no longer a region of peripheral interest. It is, or peripheral security. It is considered key security in today's world.
And what does Arctic Sentry mean for NATO's relationship with Russia? And could this further escalate tensions in the region?
It will mean a new front for Russia. I think I would imagine that Russia would like to act rather covertly and gain influence there without NATO noticing, and that's not going to happen now. So will it escalate tensions? Well, tensions are already there between Russia and Europe, and Russia and NATO, not specifically America. But Donald Trump has called Russia a rival with regards to Greenland. So it will, I suppose it will consolidate the fact that there are tensions and the world is becoming multipolar, and you have Russia on one side, China on another side, or perhaps together, and then you have the West, basically NATO, the European Union, and America. But America has its own interest. It wants to, it is in favor also of sort of collateral action. But so will it escalate tensions? I think it will confirm the tensions that already exist, and it's also a message to Russia: this is our region of influence, this is our area. We will access the resources there. We will control this part of the globe, which, as I said, is no longer of peripheral security. It is actually key in today's global security climate.
Thank you, Alison. Don't go too far, as we will be back with you very shortly. The European Union Parliament has approved a €90 billion loan to Ukraine. This financial aid helps to cover 2/3 of Ukraine's financial needs for 2026 and 2027. The loan was approved with 458 votes in favour and 140 against. The decision follows the failure of plans to use frozen Russian central bank assets for the funding. The loan is backed by the EU's common budget and it provides much needed support to Ukraine 4 years into its ongoing conflict with Russia. We are now being joined again by Alison Mutler. Thank you so much for joining us back here on NewsX World. How important is this $90 billion euro loan for Ukraine's survival and stability right now?
Well, it's a lifeline. It's vital. We're talking about a huge sum of money, 90 billion, of which 60 billion is for military, and the other 30 billion is for the rest of the budget. So it's a massive amount of money. It's a loan. We don't know the terms of repayment, but the fact that Europe has has provided this credit shows it has confidence and it wants Ukraine to be a partner. But it's not just about Ukraine; it's about European security. And we know that the Russian invasion shows no sign of abating. There've been increased attacks over this winter. Russia has shown no sign that it wants a settlement there at this moment. So this is a sign from Europe to Ukraine that we believe in you, we trust in you, and we want you to be able to defend your borders, to have your own security, which is also Europe's security. So it's a strong message as well as a massive amount of money.
And what does this decision say about the European Union's long-term commitment to Ukraine?
Precisely that. It shows there is long-term agreement. Next week, it will be 4 years since Russia walked into Ukraine, invaded Ukraine. We have still, despite all kinds of promises from Trump, and Russia's saying that Ukraine is to blame. There's no peace settlement. There is no peace settlement. There is no peace agreement. There is no end to hostilities. So this shows that 4 years into it. Europe is not getting tired. Europe is not getting bored. Europe is extending a lifeline. It's survival for Ukraine. I mean, 60 billion will buy a lot of military hardware. I know there are some terms attached to the loan that Ukraine is expected to buy its military equipment mainly from EU countries, but it is a sign that Ukraine's security is also Europe's security. And as the war shows no sign of ending at this moment, Europe is saying to Ukraine, we are standing with you.
Thank you, Alison. Don't go too far, as we will be back with you again soon. The EU is stepping up its efforts to tackle the growing drone threat across Europe. Following a series of mysterious drone sightings that disrupted airports, military bases and nuclear sites, EU officials are pushing for tighter drone registrations. They also aim to create a no-fly zones and enhanced detection system to improve security. They aim to track drones more effectively, even smaller ones, and map sensitive locations to prevent flyovers. The EU also plans to develop counter-drone technology, including AI-driven monitoring. While no concrete investment figures have been provided, officials believe these measures will help authorities quickly identify and respond to potential threats. Let's listen in.
Now we will provide clear EU-level guidance specifically on countering drone threats, and we must put them to use in all member states. And the time, I think, is right to discuss the use of also geofencing technologies, enforcing clear no-fly zones in sensitive locations.
We are now being joined again by Alison Mutler. Thank you for joining us back here. Why is the EU proposing tighter drone registrations and new no-fly zones now? What recent incidents have showed gaps in current safety measures?
Well, I think what has emerged in this whole Russian invasion of Ukraine and in this war is that this war has been fought with drones, and that is something novel, that's something new. And not only that, Russia is using these drones to violate NATO territory, and they're doing it as a way of testing whether NATO will respond, testing whether NATO and European allies have a way of responding, and whether they are in solidarity with one another. So it's been exposed, these attacks over, or these violations over previous months, which is not one or two. I mean, it's like Russia is testing Europe. And Europe has, at the beginning, they were scrambling jets. Now, that's a very inefficient way of dealing with the drone. So it's very clear that Europe has to develop technology that can counter these zones, that can neutralize them. So they're doing that. They're scrambling to do that because it's clear that these drone violations were not accidental, and they were not just a test last year. They are continuing. And, obviously drones can be sent to sensitive military sites, sensitive other sites. That will be very bad for Europe. So Europe needs to defend itself from these drones, because it's a very cheap way of Russia kind of attacking European allies of the EU and NATO countries without actually, boots on the ground. It's much cheaper, it's much easier, and Russia can always deny it. It wasn't one of our drones. So it's a very insidious new form of warfare. And I think the EU, I mean, there's all kinds of plans, but behind the scenes, that they must, they'll be worried about developing a new system or systems that can actually counter these new threats. Which, as I said, a year or so ago, we weren't talking about drones like this. And now they're a central point of Russian hostilities in Ukraine, but also in the European Union and the NATO alliance.
Thank you so much, Alison, for joining us here today on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to speak to you. Some breaking news now. A Dutch court has ordered an investigation into allegations of mismanagement at Nexperia, the chip maker controlled by Chinese parent company WingTech. The court also upheld an October decision to suspend Zhang Zhuzhang, the former CEO of Nexperia and founder of WingTech, citing the need for stability within the company. This ruling follows a prolonged legal dispute that has seen control of Nexperia handed to its European management team. The investigation will look into claims made by senior European executives regarding mismanagement at the firm. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian has said today that Tehran is ready for nuclear verification, insisting Iran is not seeking nuclear weapons. Speaking at a rally marking the 47th anniversary of the Islamic Revolution, Pezeshkian reiterated Iran's stance, stating, "We have stated this repeatedly and we are ready for any verification." He has also criticised the United States and Europe for creating a high wall of mistrust, preventing successful nuclear talks. Furthermore, Pezeshkian emphasised that Iran will not bow to excessive Western demands, but is committed to promoting regional peace. Meanwhile, the country is still dealing with internal unrest following widespread protests over economic hardship. Let's listen in to what the Iranian president had to say.
ما نمیخوایم دعوا کنیم. ما از روز اول اومدیم ما قصد دعوا کردیم. ما میخوایم تو این دنیا با صلح و امنیت زندگی کنیم. اما قرار نیست با ذلت زندگی کنیم. قرار نیست اونا هر چی دلشون خواست تحمیل بکنند و ما نوکری اونا رو بکنیم. همان گونه که شما میتوانید مردم ایران ما میتوانند و ما میتوانیم کشوری درست کنیم آباد و سربلند و با قدرت بریم جلو.
We are now being joined by Mohammed Osman, who's a Middle East expert, joining us from Cairo. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. What does Iran's declaration that it's ready for any verification of its nuclear program signal about Tehran's diplomatic strategy, and how might different international actors interpret this claim?
Thank you for having me, Ellie. Always a pleasure to be with you on NewsX World. It seems that Iran, through President Pezeshkian's speech today, is attempting to signal to the United States that it is ready for an actual fair and just deal over its nuclear program, that it is ready to present certain concessions in this regard, meaning that they wanted to ensure the United States and the international community that they have no intentions, once again, of developing nuclear weapons or weaponizing their nuclear program, and that they are willing to provide concessions or offer concessions. However, these concessions have to be logical and not excessive. And of course, Pezeshkian says this on the while his regime basically, or the regime he symbolizes one way or the other, celebrates the 47th anniversary of the revolution that brought it to power. And of course, it comes at a time where actually for the first time, the legitimacy of this regime is being seriously challenged by the latest wave of demonstrations, and of course on account of the acute economic crisis that the country is suffering from, and also the increasingly external pressure that it is being subjected to by the United States very belligerent stance with regards to Iran's nuclear program, missile program, and its relation with its proxies. So the Iranians are sending basically, and through Pezeshkian, one of the leading figures of the moderate faction in Iran, who prefer a deal and a diplomatic solution for the nuclear issue with the United States. He is signaling that they are ready for a diplomatic solution, and that they are trying to be flexible, and that the United States in turn has to be more flexible. However, of course, this does not reflect a universal will inside Iran. There are certain elements inside Iran, especially elements close to the supreme leader and within the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and the so-called conservative or fundamentalist camp, who would rather enter into a confrontation with the United States and Israel and incur the damages, thinking that the regime can survive this by rallying the people around the flag. This would be for them better than brokering a nuclear deal that will basically make them forfeit what they consider one of the flagship national projects of the country that gives them strategic options. So it's far from being simple, Ellie, and I think that the days ahead will be full of surprises potentially.
And given long-standing concerns over Iran's nuclear capabilities, How credible is Tehran's insistence that it is not seeking nuclear weapons? And what role should independent inspectors like the IAEA play in verifying that?
Of course, by virtue of international law, any country that has a nuclear facility and is a member of the NPT and is a member of the International Atomic Energy Agency has to subject its nuclear facilities and establishments to international scrutiny. This is part of the law. However, Iran, of course, since the war with the latest war with Israel, the 12-day war, has had a confidence crisis with the IAEA. They do believe that the IAEA colluded in paving the way for the Israeli aggression against Iran. This is something that they actually believe. And even though Egypt played a very pivotal role in brokering an agreement, the Cairo agreement a few months ago, between the IAEA and Iran in order to resume cooperation and inspections. However, when the European Union, the E3 countries, especially Britain, the United Kingdom, France, and Germany, reactivated the snapback mechanism and international sanctions were automatically reinstated on Iran, this basically sabotaged the Cairo agreement, and the cooperation between the IAEA and Iran has been largely limited, which leaves the nuclear program beyond any serious oversight, which basically opens the door for speculation. I do not believe that Iran wishes to possess a nuclear weapon at this point, because if they do develop a nuclear weapon, they know that this would mean that they would become another North Korea, perpetual isolation with all the dangers this entails, especially that they do not enjoy the same very special and deep relationship that North Korea, for example, enjoys with patrons such as China and to a lesser extent Russia. The alliance and the relationship between Iran and Russia and China, its dynamics is very different from that of North Korea at the end of the day. And North Korea, of course, is far from a model to aspire to. The Iranians do not really want to develop a nuclear warhead at this point, but they do want to retain the capability to develop one in case they have to at some point. And they do possess most of those capabilities. And this is what is causing all the anxiety with the United States and Israel. And unfortunately, so far, we do not see any indicators that a workable agreement is on the table between the United States and Iran. And Netanyahu's visit to the United States will definitely serve to complicate matters even further, making the option of war even more plausible than before, Ellie.
Thank you. Don't go too far, Mohammed, as we will be back with you very shortly. An Istanbul court has sentenced prominent TV talent manager Aysi Barim to 12.5 years in prison for allegedly seeking to overthrow the government during the 2013 street protests. Prosecutors initially sought a life sentence for Barim, 55, accusing her of complicity in a plot to destabilize the government. Barim has denied these charges since her arrest in January 2025. The case has raised concerns over the Turkish government's handling of dissent. We are being joined back again by Mohammed Osman. Thank you so much for joining us back here.
Thank you.
What does the prison sentence of a high-profile figure in Turkey's entertainment industry reveal about the Turkish government and judiciary's approach to dissent and political protests?
I think for the past decade or decade plus, about 10 to 13 years, Turkey has been witnessing what political scientists and human rights experts as well would call democratic backsliding, unfortunately. We are seeing an erosion of democratic institutions in Turkey. We are seeing Turkey and the authorities in Turkey departing from the principles of constitutional rule and observing and upholding human rights and universal freedoms in exchange for a new sort of hybrid form of governance that is growing increasingly authoritarian. We have seen how President Erdogan and his administration has been dealing with opposition as of late. We have seen prominent opposition figures being persecuted on account of their political views and on account of their opposition to the government, including senior members of the People's Republican Party, the CHP, the main opposition party of the country, and a party that is basically the party of the founding father of the Republic of Turkey, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. So we are seeing, unfortunately, these trends of autocratic behavior on behalf of the Turkish administration that is very concerning to many. However, it seems as well at the same time, even though this is the case, the government of Turkey and President Erdogan is very popular within certain circles in Turkey. His administration has delivered on many fronts. Of course, a huge part of society, especially the liberal intellectual class of societies, they are very skeptical about his Islamic tendencies, the Islamist roots of his party, his position on Turkish laicism or secularism and the separation of church and state, basically. And of course, there are valid concerns with regards to his administration's dealing with the files of human rights and basic freedoms. However, at the same time, I do not think that Turkey is unstable, even though there is an economic crisis. Turkey is a regional power. It enjoys a balanced and strong relationship with NATO, which she is. It is a part of a very good relationship with the Trump administration, a balanced relationship with Vladimir Putin and Russia, and very good relations now with its Middle Eastern neighbors, with Egypt, with Saudi Arabia, with Syria, of course, which now is becoming basically a client state of Turkey, and very balanced relations with Iran. So Turkey is far from being unstable, even though it is growing increasingly authoritarian.
Thank you so much, Mohammed Osman, for joining us here today on NewsX World. A deadly drone strike has reportedly killed 2 children and injured 12 others in Sudan's southern Kordofan region. The attack took place in the city where a drone struck a traditional religious school. The Kordofan region has become one of the fiercest battlegrounds in Sudan's ongoing war. This conflict between the RSF and the Sudanese army, which began in April 2023, has left thousands dead and millions displaced. Reports say that the RSF has been trying to regain control of the strategic areas like El Rahad and the nearby city of El Obeid, while the army works to push back paramilitary forces. This latest attack reflects the ongoing violence in Kordofan, where people are living under constant threats from drone strikes. The internal war has split the country into 2, with the Sudanese army holding the north and east and the RSF controlling the west and parts of the south. Poland has announced it will not join the US-led Board of Peace under the current circumstances. Prime Minister Donald Tusk confirmed this decision, citing national concerns about the structure of the board. Earlier, Poland's Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski had earlier questioned why Polish taxpayers should fund Gaza's reconstruction when Poland didn't contribute to its destruction. Sikorski also expressed doubts about the board's legal framework and its future once US President Donald Trump leaves office. That's all we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.